Hello friends, welcome back to day 6 of the garden prep challenge. I'm working on my first row of tomatoes. These tomatoes were beautiful this year, and now I have to clean up with the aftermath of that fact. I have, I think, 5 rows total in my main garden of tomatoes. Each one is about 17 or 18 feet long. And I have used cattle panels as my trellising for tomatoes for probably 5 years or so now. I love it, but taking all of the vines off at the end of the year is definitely not one of my favorite things. But thankfully, the boys helped me out and we got it done fairly quickly. I was a little indecisive about what I was going to do to cover this row. It had mulch on it, but it had mostly broken down. I was going to put fabric down, and then I changed my mind last minute and I decided to plant my garlic there. So I am going to top off the walkway, which all of my walkways in this garden are permanent walkways, meaning I don't ever lay out my rows different directions, different spacings. I have all 4-foot wide beds, 2-foot wide walkways, and the walkways have been wood chipped with cardboard underneath it, but they just need some topping off from time to time because obviously the wood chips break down, and occasionally I will get kind of dirt that washes down from the bed next to it. So I don't know that I'll get all of them topped off with wood chips this fall, but as I have time or energy, I'm going to give some of them a little bit of a fresh layer. I've been kind of hopping around in other growing spaces for the past few days, but I decided I'm going to check off the areas as I complete them in my main garden, just to give me a little bit of a visual of how far I've gone. As far as planting garlic goes, I have probably not bought garlic seed for 4 years, at least since we've been here. I just always pick out the biggest and best bulbs from our own harvest that year before. I grow almost exclusively hardneck garlic now just because I like the bigger heads. I like getting scapes kind of earlier in the season, and I always mulch them deeply with grass clippings, which means that they grow really, really well because garlic does not like to have a lot of competition. It doesn't like to dry out, and I have a whole video about growing and harvesting garlic that I'll put a link to in the description. But if you haven't planted them before, excuse me, you just break apart your heads, leave all of the paper intact, and when you plant them, you are going to put them, some people say like 6 to 8 inches apart. I usually do it a little bit denser, more like 5 inches probably. And I will show you guys the special tool that I use to make spacing them out really, really evenly so that they're nice and neat rows that are easier to weed and mulch around. You can see all of the epic root systems from the bases of my tomato plant. And if I wasn't planting garlic in right now in this bed, I would just leave those to break down over the winter time. Normally, I do not plant garlic until after November 1st, just because you do not want to get it into the ground too early and have it start sprouting before it kind of goes dormant. Now, it's not the end of the world if it does start sprouting. It's just better if it doesn't. Let's talk about spacing them out. A few years ago, made a tool called a dibbler out of wood. And basically what you see here, this is my broad fork, but it is the exact same thing, just out of metal. Now, instead of rocking up with my broad fork, I'm literally just using this to kind of make an impression of holes for me to put my garlic into. And the nice thing about this is that I can make a whole bunch of holes at once that are all evenly spaced apart. And they're not going to go as deep in the holes as you see these tines are, but it does kind of loosen the soil where the exact, direction that the root systems for the garlic plant are going to go. So if you don't have a broad fork, you can make one of these just out of a wooden dowel. I've even seen people that make them like a full 2x2 kind of framed. It's called a dibbler. Just look it up and you'll find tons of different options. I have no idea how many pounds of garlic or actual individual cloves of garlic I am planting. I pretty much just know at this point that one 4 by 18-ish foot bed is more than enough for us for a year, both for like our salsa and our pasta sauce making and anything that we would need, and enough for seed for the following year. But here's kind of better look of how they're all evenly spaced out. Now I'm just going to lightly rake the soil back over the top, and then I am going to mulch it. I actually decided I was going to mulch it with some bedding from the chicken coop, but you could use grass clippings, you could use straw, you could use old hay, pretty much anything will work, but it is pretty typically recommended to mulch it with something. Now, some people might be wondering about using chicken bedding directly in the garden. And here are two things to consider. First of all, putting it in the garden in the fall gives it all winter to start breaking down and decomposing. And a lot of that heavy nitrogen that people have typically in their bedding from their chicken coops isn't going to be directly on the plants until well after it's had time to kind of break down and even soak some into the soil. Also, I didn't grab the bedding from directly under the roost, which is where most of their manure load is. So this actually didn't have a lot of manure in it, but I'm glad to have this done. Really important part of the fall garden is getting that garlic in. And now I have 3 rows in a row that are finished, which is so exciting to see. See you guys tomorrow.